Welcome, everybody, to another version of ARCA's podcast, Elevated Views. My name is Kevin Kramers. I'm the ARCA Technical Officer, and I'm joined with Don Wilson, one of the ARCA accepted inspectors with a very long history in roofing, wearing several hats. So welcome, Don. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite fine.
Could you give us a brief history of the hats that you've worn and the experience that you have in roofing? I know it is quite long.
Sure. Well, I started as a teenager in the roofing industry as a summer job and then started full-time in April of 1st, actually. It was an April Fool's joke, I thought. Since 1976 till now. Attended roofing school, got my journeyman ticket in 1978. Worked at Charlton and Hill from that time till 2000 when I left the company. Went on to become a roofing inspector.
Being a roofing inspector, we know that you go out there and you see a lot of the work in progress, but I also imagine you get a lot of calls from other people outside of new construction and re-roofing projects. Things where people are trying to find leaks, find problems with they have on the roof. How often do you get those calls to go out and help people out with their problems?
When I first started, Hugh Thorsten was who hired me, and he was Swan Roofing Consultants. And he says, that's a good offshoot to being a roofing inspector, utilizing our extensive knowledge in roofing and past histories, me being a roofer, so I worked on roofs, looked for leaks, found leaks. And then when I become an inspector, you'd get the odd call on one of your old projects where there was a problem and they'd call the roofer, couldn't get the roofer back, and then they'd ask you, and of course you'd go do it because you want to keep good clientele and future business. And some of the school boards I worked with and cities, you go back and you help them discover what their issue is. I probably get at least 10 of those a year throughout the year of major ones. You have all your minor ones. I also took on and become a Hague certified commercial and residential and wind damage inspectors. And Hague is an organization out of Texas that the insurance industry uses. All their adjusters are supposed to be Hague certified for when we have these major catastrophes, hail, wind damage, and things like that. And so you take these courses and you become certified, and so you get to investigate. So there's a lot of knowledge there.
There is a lot of, like you say, offshoots to your primary, I guess you could say, business of the inspections, but dealing with insurance agencies, especially, I would say, either in Tornado Alley in mid-Alberta or even down in the south, we are getting a lot more storms. Have you seen an increase in those requirements of those, say, the wind and the hail inspections after events come through?
I do. And living in Lethbridge, there was a professor at the University of Lethbridge that wrote a huge article when they were going to build the Old Man Dam. And of course, I live in southern Alberta in Lethbridge, and everybody says, oh, they joke about it because it's the windy city. And in the south, we have much stronger sustained wind. This professor wrote that when they built the Old Man Dam and filled this gully in, that it was going to change our weather climate in the south tremendously. And just roofing all these years, I've seen a huge change. Back when I was a kid, I saw tornadoes a bit in the south. We had more thunderstorms and hail, and they kind of diminished for a while. Now they're starting to make a big comeback this last 5 years, that we're starting to see hail more in the south again. We always see it through central Alberta, like you're saying, Tornado Alley, but southern Alberta gets tornadoes too, but what we get more are what's known as what's called wind shears. So we can get roofs that can get torn off due to 140 to 170 kilometer winds. Kind of an offshoot of talking about leaks, but they do cause leaks when the roof blows off. My experience, I've been involved in 3 major ones, and every one of them, it's positive pressure. I've yet to see one where the wind blew over, crossed the parapet, and created that suction to take the roof off. Now, the 3 that I've been involved in with, 2 of them were failures at a doorway where large hangar doors opened up. The wind went in the building and pushed up through because it was an older structure, had no proper AVB, air vapor barrier, on it, so it started lifting the roof off and away it went. And I was involved in one where a parapet actually failed. And what the failure was, what we discovered with the engineer and the roofing contractor and myself, and that was that the contractor only fastened the plate down to the steel deck. He was some places 2 foot, sometimes 3 foot. It wasn't fastened correctly. And it was funny because it was an EPDM ballasted roof system that 40 squares just lifted, flopped over, and all the parapet was still glued and attached to the rubber. So we knew it wasn't a roof membrane failure. It was a structural failure. Part of that was because it was at an overhang at a big doorway entrance of a supermarket. And they had these fancy stainless steel soffit, and some of those panels shook out. So they failed. And then once again, positive pressure, the wind went up and tore it off because there was a weak spot at the parapet.
Interesting, and it just kind of builds, I guess, your repertoire, your history of dealing with things when you're seeing all the ones with hail damage, wind damage, even aging over time, both in the insurance industry or insurance inspections that you do and regular inspections. So you probably have quite a good toolbox full of things to look at when you're asked to call for leaks.
I do. When we look for leaks, I use my old history. I had the fortunate opportunity at Charlton Hill in my 25 years there that for 7 years I ran what we called a patch crew. Most good roofing contractors have this, maintenance patch crews. A lot of the guys didn't want to take on that role because they weren't getting the overtime. So I made a deal at Charlton Hill at the time. You know, I was one of the lead foremans. I was getting tired of doing the big jobs and stuff because there was no challenge. Just go out and do the same old, same old, same old. So I just asked them, I says, okay, they wanted to do a permanent patch crew for a change. I says, okay, I'll do that, but you got to make sure that I'm the guy that goes on the rainy days or the snowy days or whatever when the roof's leaking, to be the guy that goes and looks at it first. Because it's very important investigation at that time to look at it when it's actually happening. Because there's so many telltale signs that'll help if you can see the leak. I used to call myself a forensic roofer in the leak as a patch crew because I've yet to see a leak in my almost 50 years of roofing that could not be found. If you were able to have the time and the ability to do some destructive testing. It has to be a combination of both to really solve the really hard leaks. The ones that so many different people have gone to look, couldn't find it, can't figure it out.
I know a lot of times, even with some of the leaks I look at, having that different set of eyes or having people who have experienced other leaks is always an added benefit because what you see, what I see, what a third person sees is always different. And our history is always different in that you being a roofer, you see, or you have that really intimate knowledge how everything goes together, what the details are in the corner. Whereas I can say, okay, this is where the standards are, this is what we put in place so that these areas don't leak. And then by chance you might have a third person that, well, I've already seen a leak like this, let's look at that first. So it's always interesting to see how different people attack it. Do you have almost like a procedure when you go up on the roof and look for leaks?
I actually do have a set procedure, and I developed it when I was my forensic roofer and patch crew foreman. And I still use it to this day. When I get called in by clients to investigate a roof leak, that's been a challenge. They've had roofers over, can't find it. And then I get called in, and the first thing I always do, and I found out, I always get them to show me where the leak is inside the building. Because there's so much that history there that'll tell me just from going in and looking at the roof leak. So they'll say, oh, look at, here's the leak, and you see the ceiling panel, and it's stained. Go, well, do you have a stepladder handling? Can we remove that? And look, what do you need to do that for? It will be one of the first questions you always get asked. Or you look at what room you're in. Maybe you're in a bathroom and there's a roof leak. So already in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there's probably an exhaust fan, a plumbing stack on the roof. These are detail areas that potentially could leak because it's detail work. Very rare do we find most leaks in the middle of the field area of roofing. Being an old roofer, but roofers are pretty good doing the field area. Even if we make minor mistakes there, they don't result in too many leaks. But detail work, you make one little mistake there, that's where the opening is into the building right away. So it's going to leak. So you look up in the ceiling and you discover what kind of deck it is. That's very important. What kind of roof deck? So I'm writing these things down as I'm looking. I got a little my notebook when I go to a job, and I write down, okay, it's a steel deck. Okay, well, steel decks, Q decking, it's like a bunch of eaves troughs. So the water's going to run, and then you look where it's dripping out of. Well, maybe it's the tie wire that's holding the ceiling T-bar. It's only coming out of that hole. But it could be running for a distance. But usually you look, and if there's more holes in that channel, either direction, well, you know you're sustained now into maybe a 4x4 foot area. Because if it would be leaking out of multiple ones, if it was up farther, the actual leak on the roof.
You find the leak in the steel, and it's coming through the steel deck. You find that one hole that you say a screw may have been placed during construction and backed out for temporary, for electrical, mechanical, whatever. And water can travel 200 feet down a steel roof deck until it actually finds a way to get through.
Yeah. And that's very key what you said, because that's another thing, because then you look at which way the decks are lapped. That's very crucial too, because when they lay this decking, they lap them. So you'll have a seam there where it's lapped. Well, that's not sealed because it's just decking. You look at the direction that that deck is laying, it has to be to the side where the deck lays on top of the next deck on top of the next, because the water is going to flow over them. It won't be coming from the opposite direction because it would have leaked out of that other 20-foot section back farther. So I find a leak, and to the north of this leak, the deck is lapped underneath. So 20 feet to the north, I know it could have leaked there. But to the south, it could be 200 feet or whatever distance to the parapet wall, because it could run along that channel. But then you also look in the ceiling when you look down that way, is there any penetrations in line? Wood decks now, they get a little tougher because they're wood. But the thing is, wood decks are easier because usually if the leak is on a wood deck, it's going to rot right there. It's not going to travel a long ways unless you know that there's a high quality vapor barrier, such as a nail 1, mop 1, or nail 1, mop 2 ply, where we've got a temporary roof in essence on the wood deck. Or nowadays that we use a lot of these peel and stick vapor barrier membranes, put them on a wood deck, yeah, it could run a long ways.
It's gonna have to find that hole in the vapor barrier before it gets through.
And usually most of the leaks are at a hole in the actual deck. It's very rare you find one right in the middle of the deck somewhere. And then another deck that's really tricky to find stuff is tongue and groove. Decks that have been built with 3-inch cedar or pine tongue and groove decks. But the end joint, there's so many and they're staggered, well, it could drip out of that spot. And that's a potential spot. It's just knowing how decks are built, and I guess even though I'm not an engineer or a structural guy, but my roofing experience, and I've seen so many different style decks. Worst one to ever find a roof leak on is a concrete deck, because it's going to be coming out of that penetration through the concrete, but it could be coming from anywhere. So those are the ones where you got to start doing what I call my core test. We would do them in 4-foot increments out away from where it's dripping through that we've discovered. And you go 4 feet, 4 feet, and you tell the customer, I'm going to make these holes, but I'll patch them back correctly. So you got to cut these, because water leaves a stain. That's where that forensic roofing comes in. Or it's rotten material, depending on the roof structure. There's never been a roof leak that I haven't found if I was given enough time and the ability to do what I thought was necessary to do to find it, cutting core tests.
So would you say one of the biggest things, I wouldn't say misunderstood, but one of the things that we ask the most from customers who have leaks is patience? Because like you say, we can find the leak, but sometimes it does take time, both by you want to see it when it's actively leaking, and even if you do find a detail or a component that may introduce water into it, how can you be 100% sure that that is going to be the problem and what you do will fix that?
Customers were everything. And so it was always best to make a customer happy. Because when you had a happy customer, when he does have a major problem, you're the first guy on his phone list when there's a roof issue, or to get his roof redone. He's not even thinking of price or anything else. You've dealt with him, you've handled with him, and I found that, like you just said, if we thought, okay, here's the spot, And I did have that a few times in my career. I thought, yeah, we've got it. You know, you're all gung-ho and sure, and I found it. So you fix it. But we would always tell them, we fixed what we discovered. It may be coming in from somewhere else. Please call us right away. And when we would do that, we had customers that never got upset with us. I mean, we had one client that was very mad at us one time, and it was funny. It's kind of a funny story, but it's a roof leak. But yet it's not a roof leak. So this client, we had just done his CRU, re-roofed it, and finished it off. It's July. Job is done. Hadn't rained for like 2 weeks. But it was an extremely hot July, and he calls us. We got a roof leak. So Rick Tanaka, who was the manager at the time, he says, Don, go over and see that guy. I says, okay. So go over, walk in, introduce myself, tell him why I'm here. So he takes me over to show me the ceiling panel where it's actually dripping. He says, yeah, we got a bucket up there. I don't know what you guys did when you did my roof, but you must have caused something because it's leaking. My crew, my two helpers that were with me, my right-hand man, he was really good all the time. He was getting the ladder set up. He's going up because I'm inside with the customer. And he's getting everything set up and taking tools up there that we might need to fix the leak once we're up there. So I'm inside talking to the customer, and he shows me, and so I says, can I borrow a step ladder? So I got the step ladder, moved the ceiling tile, and I'm kind of up in the ceiling with my flashlight, and I'm laughing already because I know exactly what the leak is. So I don't want to spoil the mystery here, but so I come down and ask the customer, I says, can you show me your thermostat? And he looks at me, what do you need to see my thermostat? Humor me. Can you show me your thermostat? So he takes me over to the wall where the thermostat is, and he's got it sitting at 20 degrees Celsius. It's 36 degrees outside. Fortunately, this is one of my experiences I took from Charlton Hill and things. We used to, when we were slow, worked with the HVAC guys in the service department because we had those, and I'd go out with the service guys, and the service guys always told me the best thing for summertime is never to have your thermostat set more than about 5 to 7 degrees different from the outside temperature. So if it gets into the 35s, you should crank your thermostat up to maybe 26, 27 inside. Now people are thinking, oh, it's hot. The building isn't going to heat, but once the building got to that temperature, your cooling would come on. And these units are working hard, so the coil on them freezes. And I could see the water dripping out of the ductwork. So I went over and I said, you should turn that up to about 25 right now, 25, 26. So he did that, and I says, we'll go up on the roof, we'll figure it out. And by then, I go up on the roof. Well, my right-hand man, he worked with me for 3 years. He already had the panels off the unit, and we're getting rid of the water out of the pan because it's overflowing in the pan from the coil. The coil's totally solid white, just frozen solid. I don't even know how he was getting any cooling. So we had the roof, his leak fixed in half an hour. And he actually thanked us, because he goes, and here I thought it was you guys' work on the roof. So that was one of my funny stories about finding a leak, because it was a leak to that customer. It was very important. Water was dripping in, but it actually wasn't the result of the roof.
Well, Don, we're having some amazing discussions. I suggest we take a break, grab a coffee, and come back for part 2.